Yeah.
All right, so we got a few more people in the chat. Let's go ahead and kick it off. And I want to start by just giving a little bit of background. I sent out, if you're on my newsletter, I sent out an email earlier kind of explaining a little bit about this. But like I've always been a really, really big advocate of learning. And even if you have a full-time software development job, like some time at your job should be dedicated to you experimenting, learning, watching videos, watching content. Maybe it's watching live streams if they're useful and relevant to you. But like it never ends, right? And so recently I felt like a little complacent. Like I was watching the tutorials and the things that I would build, and it was just I wasn't stretching myself really at all. I was just still kind of using the same stuff that I'm relatively comfortable with. And I really wanted to change that. And then I was looking at like my technical goals for the year, and there's always like at the beginning of the year you have this like list of technologies that you like want to look into and blah blah blah. And so I started listing these things out, and there's a bunch, right? There's like CSS Grid, which we'll talk about today. There's Vue and Svelte, and like diving more into serverless, diving more into different aspects of Jamstack. I've still wanted to get into using Tailwind CSS, like all these different things, right? And it's infinite possibilities. And I was thinking about like, well, how do I actually know that I actually gained any traction in those areas? So my goal was to spend on any given topic, maybe a couple of weeks, go through and watch some videos, watch YouTube videos, read articles, talk to people who are experts, or I consider you an expert at least in comparison to me, and Brian and CSS Grid, and make that a little bit like make that some of the interactions that I have with people online as well. So go through all those learning processes, ask questions in Twitter, respond to people's posts, and kind of interact with them that way, and then record content. So my latest video on YouTube, which is here, is kind of a recap of the stuff that I learned, and then me going through and hands-on building some different things in using CSS Grid, which actually I was really proud of. I feel like I kind of came into it relatively quickly and feel like comfortable, although Brian's about to push the limits of this um, in a couple of weeks. And hi, Lori, how's it going? Thanks for coming. Hopefully, a couple of days off at Gatsby, which is a great idea, I think, by the way. Hopefully, that was helpful for you and everyone at Gatsby. Um, but yeah, so that was my goal. And then I've got this idea. This is not quite formally branded yet, but um, as part of that, I one of my biggest pet peeves is like wanting to learn something new and then having that like something's going wrong and you don't have someone to ask a question to. So like I could spend hours on something that's really small in a new technology or new area that I haven't used before, and someone else like Brian could come in, and this has actually happened before where I spent like so much time trying to figure out with an image why the hell there was this gap in the bottom when it's in the bottom when it's inside of a div, like a car div, and it's like you have to change it to display block instead of default it's inline. Is that right?
It's by default inline block,
Okay, so then you
inline
have to
dash
change
block.
it to block. Got it. So that was one of those things. Like I spent, I mean, like an hour trying to figure this out, and he was like, "Oh yeah, just do this one thing." And it was like, so my biggest pet peeve is wasting too much time on learning. Like some of it's valuable because you experience that struggle and then you understand like, hey, this is why these things are here and this is how it works. But I wanted to bring on guests, one to kind of just meet new people and learn about new technologies, and then have those people be able to kind of be the assist layer for me as I potentially get stuck with things that I'm working on in that technology area. So unofficially, that's probably going to be branded as like learning quick. So learning quickly, learning fast, and then also in the South, although I don't think many people actually say this, but some people actually say like I'm going to learn you something, as in I'm going to teach you something. So it has a little bit of that like double entendre with the Southern interpretation, I guess. So, unofficially, that being the brand, this is basically the first episode of that. So I've got Brian Robinson, who's on today, who again I look at least in my opinion, an expert on CSS Grid. Brian, do you want to do a quick intro about who you are and where people can find you?
Oh, sure. So you can find me, and I'll put this in chat at brianlrobinson.com. I'm on Twitter at BROB at BRob. I have been doing web design development in some form or fashion for about 14 years now. I've been speaking about CSS in particular for about 4 years. I'm also a streamer. You can find me at Brian L. Robinson here on Twitch. Come get some juicy emotes from me as well. But yeah, I like front end development. I like the Jamstack. I'm all about CSS. CSS has been where I've done my deep dive for about 5 or 6 years now, and it's a beautiful place. And if you don't believe me, you're about to find out how awesome it is.
Yeah, I don't think anyone's actually gonna win the argument with you that like CSS Grid isn't worth looking into, and that's the thing that like I've you've showed me a couple things over the last like year and a half, and I just
Mhm.
like, all right, I'll do that, and then I did it, and then I never really understood what was going on, or never did anything more with it. So
Lori,
this
it is a
is,
beautiful place. Don't even. It's a beautiful place.
yeah. There's, I feel like Lori might be able to give you a run for your money on debates, but we'll see. So anyway, what the format?
Also,
Oh,
refresh
go
your
ahead.
code pen there, James.
Oh, refresh. Did you change something in here?
I did, and plus it should update our live sync. So
So we
still
use
not
that.
grabbing it. There should be three exercises now. Oh, I'm not actually in collab mode. That's a problem.
Okay, so am I in collab mode? I still don't
You're
know.
you're a-okay.
All right. See,
I am wrong.
I tend to do things right. So, as I was saying, the way this is going to work is ask Brian to come on. And like in the future, I'll probably not do as much research as I have coming into this, and it'll be more of a getting started video. This one, I've done a little bit of research, and then I wanted to bring Brian on to like kind of challenge me with CSS Grid to see if I can do any of the things that he's asking of me, and that's going to be fun, I think, and a little bit scary for me to see how I stack up with what his expectations are. So we've got a shared code pen and collaboration mode where we can both edit in real time, and he probably will have to walk me through some of these challenges.
Yep.
Just I always want to give these shout outs as well. This is in the YouTube video that I have, but three great resources for people that are interested in CSS Grid, ones that I followed along myself. One is the free CSS Grid course by Wes Boss. It's free. It's awesome. He's one of the best instructors out there. So definitely enroll in that one. There's also from Brian. This is one that I watched a long time ago, but didn't actively like take this stuff and use it in code. But anyway, this is his course, Practical CSS Grid. Similar idea of building like practical examples using CSS Grid in a couple of hours. And then CSS Tricks always has a complete guide to something. Flexbox and CSS Grid being the two main ones that I have gone through and looked at. So they've got amazing content there. You can find stuff on CSS Grid as well. So I guess I've been trying to like talk as long as I could install, but I guess this
You
is
got
where
to
we
do
get
it now.
started. So challenge number one, and he went through and like set up a nav bar and all this stuff. All right, challenge number one is create a fluidly responsive card grid with 0 breakpoints that shows one card on mobile, but never more than 4 cards on desktop.
If you check your messages, you'll have a an idea of what I sent you. I sent you an image to back that up.
Is my text messages or this
Yeah,
image?
text messages.
Oh,
That's the second exercise. The first one is the one I just sent you.
okay. I think I closed my messages again. All right.
Boo.
Oh, and this looks familiar. Have you? Is that in your course, or is that on one of the demos that you've done?
It's in my course. It's also on my website. So hopefully you got it covered.
Okay. Um, I'm just trying. Sorry, I'm trying to figure out how to get this out of text. There we go, onto the screen. So the good thing is, I think this is very cheat James cheat. Yes. Oh my gosh, what? All right, we're at
It's not gonna help him on this one, Lori. Not gonna help him on this
maybe
exercise.
not, but I do. Let me do one exercise just so we get into a little bit of the content, and then I'm coming back to that to actually see what it is. So, so you got a layout. You got different cards with the little kittens
Hmm.
and a piece of text and a call to action. And what this will do is on, I'm assuming, and this is something you've actually helped me with in the past, and is also in the video that I did. There's a minimum width for your cards, and so what you want to do is just kind of lay out as many cards on the screen as possible, where they have use min max, and we'll see that in code here in a second, where you define a minimum of 300 pixels or something, and then a maximum of 1 FR, which in grid is fractional unit. So it will take up at minimum 320 pixels, and then those things will stretch to fill the available space while auto fitting. Am I getting all the buzzwords here?
You are.
As many on the screen as possible. And I need to make sure syntactically that I can actually write that in here. But I think I've got a decent understanding of what we're doing to start.
And you should
So
have all the HTML you need in the HTML pane. You just need to figure out your CSS classes, and you should be good to go.
part of this is also I've got to go in and do the actual card. So it's not just laying out the cards; it's the card content itself.
We can circle back to the card content if you're able to complete all of my challenges today.
Oh gosh! All right. So inside, are they all going to be?
right now they're all identical in their content, so you don't have to worry about like
Okay.
sizing and anything like
So
that.
if I
I'm letting you ease in a little bit.
so what I'm looking at is one starting with the grid or card container.
Hmm.
So let me go ahead and grab that class of grid container. Display. And one of the things that does hurt in this is not being in VS Code. I don't get my IntelliSense, so now I have to actually know how to
Yeah.
spell everything out. So we'll
Oh,
see
we
how
could have
that
set it up
works.
with live share, but this was easier and quicker.
Yeah, true. And I've used that a couple of times recently. It's been really nice. So grid template columns, and what we want is repeat. The repeat function takes the first parameter is how many times you want to repeat, which in this case, we're going to have it figured out for us. So we use autofit. And the second one is how big each column can be. So min max will allow me to define a minimum of 300 pixels and a maximum of 1 FR. And do I have to, will this live reload or do I need to save?
I don't know. I think you'll need to save in some way.
All right, well, either I didn't do, well, maybe the shortcut doesn't work. I'm not sure.
Oh, maybe you can't save. Hmm.
Maybe can you save? They're usually, so isn't there like, there's a setting in CodePen to, I just don't know where exactly it is, to autosave, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Is that, is that something that's enabled, do you know, or where it is?
I don't actually see the save button at the top of yours. I thought collab mode would let you save.
Doesn't look, do you have the setting to make it autosave?
I mean, I can save. Let me actually look at the CSS. I'm not seeing any
And
things that you did in the CSS.
okay, so that
Go ahead and
hopefully means
copy
it's
those
not
real
being
fast to make sure that you don't lose it. But um,
something just triggered. So copy this. All right, got it
yeah,
copied.
copy it so we don't lose it, and then paste it in again. Okay, I
So
see you down there. You're down there. All right, things are coming in, and I think I might have to actually hit save on these, which is a little weird, but
let me know when you do that.
I have it saved in with your CSS.
Huh.
Figuring these things out. This is fun.
Okay.
Oh,
So,
okay. It's in there. The CSS is in there, but you have a mistake, my friend.
oh gosh. All right.
You have a mistake. Can chat help them out?
Yeah, anyone in the chat. And so, assuming there's a couple people who are pretty comfortable with CSS Grid, feel free at this point, throw me a lifeline and help me out with the error is as I look at this.
First things
Um,
first. Is it a CSS grid error?
oh, I said this out loud too. Card container. As I read it, I said grid container. All right, cool. Um, so Walker or not Walker, Water Seeker is saying when you first open CodePen editor to create a new pen or work, autosave is off. We don't want you to
Hmm.
force to say something you might just be playing around with. Autosave is enabled on
Hmm.
after you've saved once. Autosave is enabled until you close the pen for CodePen. Cool.
Yep.
All right. So if I, what's the best way to shrink? I guess just my personal browser.
Yep.
And as I shrink this, oh, the issue we're gonna have is the images themselves
That
are not kind of staying within their box. So you can
that's one issue,
see,
sure.
well, you can see that at the very least, the hello worlds, like the number of titles there, the boxes are shrinking, and then it's going from 4 to 3 to 2, and now eventually to 1. So at least the grid container itself is relatively working. One thing I would probably add, I assume you had, I think you had it in yours too, is the grid gap, just to give a little
Yep.
bit of separation. And again, because of those images not fitting into the container, they are kind of bleeding over. So let's go and grab. Hmm. So, like you
Hmm.
mentioned, I may not have to do the actual like cards themselves, but I have to do the cards themselves to get the image to fit inside of it, right?
You at least have to make it not look like this.
All right, let's grab a card, and this is the kind of stuff that honestly I'm not like I've written that one line of code earlier with the grid template columns enough. Aligning stuff into a card is actually not something I'm super confident with. So We've got the card title, thumbnail, and description. And what was the final? Which order did you have these in? I'm gonna close these out for this one. So you still have them title, image, cool. So I'm assuming what you would have in there is it looks like they're all stacked on each other. So I may not even need display grid. Maybe that's, I think you kind of alluded to that earlier. I'm going to comment this out for now. And first grab the card thumbnail and set a height on it. So it looks like your heights are consistent. So maybe it's 200 pixels. And I don't know if me saving anything does anything or if it just auto reloads.
It's been auto reloading pretty good.
Okay. Is that
Hmm.
card thumbnail? That doesn't seem to be changing, right?
I mean, it's changing, but it's doing some weird stuff on there. Um, First
Ditch.
hint. You ready for
Yep.
a hint?
Yep.
You have a figure happening. So the HTML actually has a figure surrounding its image.
Mm-hmm.
So you're right now affecting the figure and not the image itself. Figures also by default come with some marginal space.
Hmm. All right. I'll be honest. I've never worked with a figure. Also, we got Corey from Twilio just rated with 14 people. Welcome everyone.
Whoa.
Yeah. Thank you, Corey. What's going on? How was? Did you just get done with a stream? I think maybe you were on your personal channel. I think somebody else from Twilio was doing a stream today. But anyway, welcome. And by the way, I don't know if I'm giving away secrets, but me and a few other people are in conversations with Corey to get on his channel and stream with him as well. Is that a secret? If it is, it's not anymore, so I apologize. But I'm really looking forward to that. Thanks for coming. Everybody that came with Corey, welcome. What we're looking at is totally not a secret. Good deal. I have recently spent my first time really looking into CSS Grid, so now I'm being challenged by my friend Brian, who's on to complete these challenges to figure out how to actually work with CSS Grid. So that's what we're doing today. So question. So the image is surrounded by a figure, and you said a
Yep.
figure has some built-in, which again, I've
Margin.
never used the figure before ever.
Yep.
A figure has some built-in margin.
Yes.
Okay.
So
And
if you remove the margin and
oh, it
remove your
looks
height, things will be feeling better.
okay. So all right. So it looks like actually now that you say that, I'm getting the like visual hint is it looks like figures come with margin left probably because
I would just
those
go ahead
images
and unset everything
on like do a star
on the
and
figure. Yeah. Well,
oh
no,
on the
you could
star.
do that. You could do a full reset, but on the figure.
Okay. So just margin 0. And does that okay? That pops over more, so that's cool.
Hmm.
Why did I thought earlier that our grid gap was working? Now, obviously, I'm not so sure. Oh, the grid gap is probably still working. Just still, the image is now taking up too much.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
So, and I always get confused with images. In this case, should I set the width to 100% because the width is already defined by grid, right? So, assuming the figure itself will span the entire width of the grid, the image will, if I set it to 100%, will then fit the width of the figure, and then it'll look more like what we're looking for, I think.
These are all correct assumptions. However, one thing you do need to keep in mind is do you want to set a width or a max width? And either way is fine, but they both have their own ramifications.
And you're going to expect me to try to defend why one or the other, huh?
Not necessarily, but that'd
Yeah,
be fun.
so a width versus a max width.
Hmm.
I don't know. I think that'd be interesting tidbit if you want to throw that in. What the difference
So
would be there.
sure. So a width, if you set width 100%, you'll always have your image be 100%. But what happens if you have a 50 pixel wide image and you have a 2000 pixel parent? You get an incredibly pixelated 2000 pixel wide 50 pixel image. So max width never will size an image up. It'll only ever size it down.
Hmm. Okay.
So for most applications, you want that. Now, if you can always guarantee that your image will be larger than your container space, then you can use width to make sure that you never have it like get too small. But for the most part, max width is where you're going to want to be.
Okay. And then in this case, since our cards are going to be like at most they're going to be 400 or 500 pixels, and your image is a reasonable size, we probably don't see that issue. But
Yep.
cool. That yeah, I had no idea the implications between the different options. So let's grab the card image or thumbnail. And this is using Beam syntax. While I'm typing this, do you want to give people a little bit of what Beam syntax
Sure.
is in CSS?
And not all of our exercises are going to use beam syntax. I'm literally copying and pasting from things I've done before. But beam
Okay.
syntax means block element modifier. It's a way of writing your CSS classes to allow for containerization. And I go back and forth on the philosophy of it, but it allows you to specify the block level, which is the card. So dot card, class of card is a block. And then there are elements inside of that, and that's the underscore underscore, right? So there's a thumbnail inside of the card, and it
Mm-hmm.
is dependent on being inside the card. So it gets that underscore underscore thumbnail. And then you can also have a dash dash, which is a modifier. So if we had a thumbnail small and we wanted to change like one thing about it, it could be card underscore underscore thumbnail dash dash small, or it could just be thumbnail dash dash small. So it's a way of breaking up your CSS in a way that makes it a little less likely to step on it on itself.
Sweet. Cool. And I don't like I know in theory how that works. I don't use it enough. I actually want to. Like this is the thing is I feel like for my experience, I've got like I watch enough videos and I watch enough
Mm-hmm.
people and I read enough articles that I know of different things.
Sure.
But if you ask me to consistently use Beam in my projects, I would struggle with it because I don't do it on a regular basis and I've only really done it in like a handful of lines of CSS.
Sure.
So
And so
that's
part of it
why, yeah, go ahead.
is really good in SAS, right? In SCSS, because you've got nesting. And so you can
Mm-hmm.
actually say card and underscore underscore thumbnail, and you can get that same kind of
Mm.
principle. So it's less
Mm.
typing. Now,
Okay.
granted, I don't actually use SAS all that much anymore, but it is something that you can do, and it makes Beam syntax feel less clunky.
Cool. Okay. Awesome. And I don't know if people like while you when you started to explain that, I targeted originally the card thumbnail,
Mhm.
which didn't do what I expected it to because the card thumbnail by default will fill the space of the grid, so it was already basically 100%. And then I realized that I actually needed to target the image inside of the card thumbnail. And then that looks, at least for like layout purposes, I think this is the general goal without
Yep.
adding too much styling here.
Now,
If I take this
you
out, I
have.
have 5 and then
Mhm.
4, 3, 2, and 1.
But your instructions are it should never be wider than four cards on
Ah,
desktop.
fair. Okay.
We should never see five cards.
Yeah. So I when I read that earlier, my thought is if cards are what did I say the minimum was 300 pixels?
Hmm.
So yeah, if we say the minimum for a card, and by the way, somebody in the chat, let me know, is this code too small to read? It looks like it might be a little bit small. Let me know if I need to try to zoom in there. Um, but if you don't want more than 4 cards, then 4 times 300, or yeah, 4 times 300 is 1200. That means that we can't have, we need to set basically a max width on maybe a general container of our content. So like right now, we don't have any padding on the left and right. So if we put everything in a container and set a max width to 1,000 or something like that, that would limit to where we never scale up to 5 cards.
Hmm.
Got a
The basic philosophy sounds accurate to me.
cool. Okay. Hi. Let me see. On Lamiyum. Hopefully, I didn't say that too bad. Hi. Welcome to the stream. And people that are new, if I haven't seen you before, give me just a quick introduction. What you do, what the stuff you're interested in. If you have questions, feel free to throw them in the chat, please. Um, all right. So in here, so I mean, like I would at this point. Do I get emit syntax in here? Yeah.
You
I would
do.
do.
But do you need to make any more HTML than is
Oh, and you hinted
necessary?
at me at that earlier. So, card container, instead of wrapping the entire content in a container, is this card container for all of the examples or just this
Nope.
one?
I everything has its own set of classes, so you
Okay.
are safe. You're not going to bleed any styles out.
Okay. So if I did like a max width of 1000 pixels. This will fix right now. It should jump to the left, and actually further than I thought it would. And the reason this doesn't look so great is a little centering trick. Is I can do a margin 0 auto that will center its content in the middle. And I mean, I could go up to 1200.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
I'm assuming you're humming because I'm not getting to 4 cards, only
Correct.
3.
Yep.
So if I go up to 1400, so things that I didn't take into account, although I'm not sure this is right. So grid gap is already in. Grid gap is in addition to the 300 pixels for the cards.
Correct.
So 3 cards would be 900 plus um, plus 20 times 2 for grid gap.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So then I would actually, I guess I really just have to go up above 1200. So if I went up to 1300, that would still work. And that's accommodating for 3 times 20, 60 pixels in the grid gap plus the 300 times 4 with 1200. So 1200, it needs to be above 1260 to allow for 4 cards, but um, no more than
Then
that
the
to
next sets
prevent
up.
5 cards.
Yes.
Uh,
And the big thing on that would be the main reason that I threw this in, which is not actually in the course or in my examples, is that not every problem in CSS layout is a grid or a flex problem to solve.
mhm.
The old ways still work pretty well.
Yep. Yeah, fair enough. Lori is saying, can't you force the typical number of items, then set your minimum width so it would scale down as you hit that?
Not in the syntax of grid template columns with the repeat syntax. Now, I'm not sure if that's what you're referring to, Laurie, but like minimum width per card. So the thing about that would be you could up the minimum size on that and make that work. But for extremely large sizes at that point, then you could still have 5. And then at small sizes, because that's a minimum size, if you were to say 400 pixels per, and you had a phone that was 320 pixels wide, you would actually have your card bleed out of the container at that point.
Hmm.
And the big thing on grid and thing that we need to remember as we go forward is that with CSS Grid, it's a completely different thought process. It's the first time in the history of CSS layout and web layout that we have to think layout out as opposed to the content size in. When you deal with floats or with Flexbox, you're thinking, what width do I need to make each of my children to do the layout I want? Whereas with grid, you want to say, what is the layout that I want, and then let my content flow inside of it.
Cool.
Anyway, that
Um,
is the solution to exercise number 1. Yes.
Sweet. All right, that'll work. I'm good with that. I look like I think I just moved you off of the screen because for whatever reason
Oh,
now now Zoom wants to do the layout for our video that I wanted to originally. So, Lori, just curious, how much experience do you have with CSS Grid? Is this something you use on a regular basis? Again, if you joined late, I had almost never used CSS Grid until a couple of weeks ago, so I'm still proud to be able to do what I can for now. All right, look, probably jump leaks here. And is that a built-in CSS thing to
the
smooth
smooth
scroll?
scrolling.
Yeah,
It is. If you look down below in the comment area in the CSS, there's something that says ignore the man behind the curtain. One of them is on the HTML element in the CSS side.
okay,
On the HTML element, you can specify scroll behavior smooth, and it automatically makes smooth scrolling inside your document.
gotcha.
And so on that, um, it doesn't work in all browsers, but the jump link still works in the browser. It's just not a smooth scroll. So it's great progressive enhancement.
Cool. All right, so moving on down, and you sent a picture for
That's
this
the
one. I
image.
think this is the
Yep.
image that you were looking for, so this will probably get really blurry, but what we're generally looking at is text, and then an image, and then a button, and it looks like that button is right justified within a container of some sort, and there's no extra content that you want to do with that, right? Like this is it. So what I'm thinking is there's a 2x2 grid. The first column is something like, if you look at like proportions, it's probably 5 FR, and then the second column is 1 FR. So what that means is they're fractional units. So 5 would take up 5/6 of the total space. The 1 FR will take up 1, and that, I mean, you could do 3 and 1 to do that. Probably makes more sense. Actually, I think that actually looks better. So 3 FR for the first one and 1 FR for the second column. You've got 2 rows, and then we need to put the different things in the right places. And I don't think you could use grid template areas, which I actually really like. I guess the implications of this would be, what order are the elements in the HTML? Let me close this other tab as well. So inside of the HTML, we've got, and let me scroll back down to it down here. We've got the service description, and then the icon, and it's an embedded SVG. That's one of the things I want to learn more about as well, is SVGs. And then you've got the service button. So I think I'll probably find a way to use grid template areas later, and I don't think I have to here, just because the content is in the order that I think I want anyway.
Nothing wrong with that.
So I'm going to grab .service. This is going to be, oh, as it auto refreshes, is it going to scroll to the top every time?
It is. I mean, you could also just delete the HTML. You're not gonna hurt my feelings.
Yeah, I'll comment it out. Scroll, 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 scroll. By the way, as we wrap that first part up, any questions about that? Want to make sure that people actually, one, that what I do makes sense, but then also it makes sense to like other people who are also learning. So if you have any comments or questions about either the solution to 1 or talking about how to do number 2, leave those in the chat, and I'll try to keep.
And also, I have moved James into the intermediate class at this point, so a lot of these are not the basics of grid. We're going a little bit further than that today.
Yeah. So if you additionally have questions, more basic questions about CSS Grid, feel free to throw those in as well. If this is just going beyond what you even thought you would see in here, feel free to make us pause and talk. Corey says, makes a lot of sense. Thank you for this. Need to run to a meeting. Corey, thanks for coming as always. Thanks for the raid.
Yeah.
Look forward to collaborating with you soon, now that I've officially not given away any secrets. So I can't wait for that. And I will talk to you later. And then Ancient Coder, thanks. It's funny. I'm assuming the first one is like sensei, and then the second one, or maybe it's not. How do you spell sensei?
There's an I involved.
Is it
In
a
the
Japanese word?
It is a Japanese word. Yes.
All right. All of like language stuff. Yeah, that sounds right. Language stuff aside. So we're starting with this service. We're going to do display grid. We're going to do grid template columns, and we'll do 3 FR and 1 FR to do 2 different columns. The first one takes up 3/4 of the width. The second one takes up 1/4 of the width. And
typo.
Grid template columns, because you can have more than one. We like plural stuff, I think, right?
Mm-hmm.
See, that's like one of my worst fear, to like confidently fix a bug and it's like still wrong. Like I feel like at that point you seem really bad.
I declare victory a lot way prematurely.
Yeah. All right. So the next part of this would be the rows. The implicit grid will, even if I don't define a second row, because there are more than 2 items, it'll fill out the 2 items. It'll wrap the next one down to a new row. I think this is true, and we'll see here in a secan. I'm not going to define any rows. I assume the second row will have the same column definition as the first. I'm actually pretty confident that that's true, so it'll do what we want.
You should be confident. That's exactly what happens.
Cool. Sweet. So is there anything else I need to do on the actual service itself? So I've got the image and the text laid out. I mean, I could do same kind of thing that we did earlier. I don't know that I have to, but just set a max width and then center this thing so it looks a bit better, and on smaller screens, maybe add a little bit of padding just in case. And margin 0 auto. Yeah, cool. Okay, so a little bit of basic stuff. And then in here, so right now the height of the first row is defined by the height of the largest element in first row column, which will be the icon. Do you expect that icon to be smaller, or
It sounds good to me. Sounds promising if that were to be smaller. It's awful big right now.
okay? All right, I think I agree with you. So this will be the service icon, and we want to still target now not an SVG or not an image but an SVG, and just set a height. And I have no idea how this affects SVGs. Set a height to 150 pixels. What does that do? Do SVGs respond to? I would assume they do. Oh, typo again. Beam syntax. Okay, that looks good to me.
Now, one thing to keep in mind, and
Yeah.
this is actually my bad from just copying and pasting older versions of my own code. You actually don't even need that aside with the SVG holding the SVG there, because Grid doesn't really care about container versus like image versus whatever. So I would go back and forth on whether or not I want that inside of an aside or not. I could see semantically that might make sense, although I don't even think in this case. So a grid example from 4 years ago, I've got lots of philosophical things to change, but you could just have that class of service icon on the SVG and then use that to set the height.
Okay. First off, Lori, thanks for coming. Really appreciate it. Again, hope things are going well at Gatsby. And I am sure I will see you and collaborate with you on a stream in the near future as well. So, I mean, that's like, you get into like these philosophical conversations that I don't even know where the conversation starts. Like, I have no opinion whether or not that affects. I think for the demo that I did was something recently of like cards and images inside of something. It didn't have a wrapper around the actual image itself. I just put a class on the image and then use it that way.
That's the way I would write it nowadays. Yeah.
Cool. So let me make sure. Oh, I'm gonna go ahead and close that image. So this
Ancient
one's
Coder points out a very good thing. It does look like there's some padding around that image.
padding around the image. All right, I'm gonna take a guess here and just set padding on an SVG to 0. Does SVG have some built-in padding to it?
Well, no, no.
Nope.
The point is actually in the final design, there is some
Oh.
space around the SVG.
Okay, so then on the same level, what prevents this, like right now, what prevents this text from bumping right up to the SVG?
Right now, it would actually be the way that line wraps. So if you were to somehow
Oh,
magically
okay.
have the right number of
Yeah,
characters, it would bump into the SVG.
right. Okay. Gotcha. Okay, so your comment from Ancient Coders, there's some padding inside of this text here. And,
This can be solved in multiple ways.
oh, so one, the thing I was getting tripped up on is there actual padding to the right of this text?
I,
And okay, all right. So two things we need to do. One, we need to vertically align this text in the image. So that's one thing. So this is the service. What did you call this? Description. Nope, we don't actually need to title it in there. We need to grab the service, the grid container, and
mm-hmm.
this will be align items center. Does that push it down?
Mm-hmm.
And then to add some more breathing room to the, can I just, well, I guess ends, yeah, now I can actually target the service description.
Don't forget the dot. Don't forget the period.
Yeah, thanks. And just do padding here. I don't need top and bottom, although if the logo was somehow smaller and like the text took up enough, you could use it. So I'll just do 20 pixels all the way around, and that'll give some breathing room. Won't really affect where it is vertically right now, but it'll give the breathing room inside and outside, or left and right. Okay, I think that part looks okay except for the border bottom. So border bottom 1 pixel solid orange. I'm not gonna actually
Really,
have a good hex
orange?
code. Give
Let's
me
make it
a
tomato. Tomato is the actual color.
tomato. There we go. And that looks like you've got one. It might be like 2 pixels. And this is not actually just one image. Your image is actually, you set a background on the container for the image, and that's not the, that's why our images are different. So this would be grabbing this service icon and setting background color to tomato, and then we'll have to look to see what we've got. This is going to need some padding as well to actually have that background show, or not.
Would it be padding? Padding happens on the inside.
Service.
Margin pushes around it.
Well, I'm thinking
on the services icon, there would be yeah, there you go.
So still, yeah, like padding would be what I thought made sense there. Now the tricky thing would be I centered in there. I struggled with this the other day. So I centered the items vertically. Because I centered it vertically, then I've got my border bottom is now pulled up as well. So I'm thinking this might be a combination of align items and align content. Is there a way to say, hey, make the div for the description take up the entire height like a stretch, and then also within itself center its content? Well, I guess I could make it a display grid also.
One thing you could think about is, where does that border belong if you want to always be directly above row 2?
Border top of row 2?
Potentially, yeah.
Okay, makes sense. Somebody asked in the chat, is this a site with CSS puzzles? The dolphin, I don't know when you joined, but if you joined a little bit late, the concept of this was like, I've spent some time looking into CSS Grid and figured it would be fun to have someone that knows a lot more about CSS Grid than I do come on and kind of pose these challenges to me, and in real time I'll like sweat it out and try to solve them. So that's what we're doing. This is not a dedicated puzzle site necessarily, but that's the kind of thing that we're doing right now.
In fairness, they probably should just be posting, as you come up with the solutions, the blog posts, because most of these things actually follow a blog post that I've written.
Oh, really?
Just shows how much you read my blog, James.
Well, yeah. Well, now I've got to go take a look. All right, so then we've got our service button, which is just a div, and there's going to be some aligning stuff in there, but if I do a border top on that thing, will that solve our problem? Why does that not fill? So it is, oh, it's an anchor tag in there. So the anchor tag is the service button. The service CTA is the whole thing. Service CTA. I didn't see that. That. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That seems good. Inside of the service CTA, let's see where this thing is. It looks like there's probably, I'm just going to go with 20 to keep those similar, some padding. And then I need to throw this content to the right, which inside of the, so if I start throwing that one to the right, will it, I'm not sure.
Bad things will happen to that border. But if you were to combine grid with other layout mechanisms, such as flex, you could then use the box alignment module with justified content for its button.
Well, so I was gonna ask the same thing. Like, the service CTA is a wrapper. Could I not use display grid and then align its stuff, where with justify?
Could. This is more of a use case for flex, where we want the content of the item itself to size. If you were to use grid, then you would need to like size your column and stuff like that. Whereas this, you can say display flex, justify content, flex end, and you should be good to go.
Flex and yeah. So would it not work the same way um, if you did display grid and then you said justify content? Like if you didn't define your column, wouldn't it by default take up the entire column and then you could say the same thing of justify content to the end?
You know, I'd have to look at that, but I think technically the content would then be that entire column, and you'd have to use something else on that. We could test it, but to me, when you want to size an element based on its intrinsic size, you want flex. If you want to size an element based on a layout, you use grid. So philosophically, I would go for flex in this case. That's what I would reach for in this case. Now, as we just see, it works either way.
And it's funny because I
Just
would think of
philosophically speaking, though.
okay, because I would think of this as like not necessarily fitting around the size of the content, but more positioning the content and the concept of grid because like it going to the right is not dependent upon how big itself is. It's more positioning it inside of a container of some sort.
Potentially. Again, that's more like a philosophical thing, and it works either way.
No.
I just reach for flex when I want it to be intrinsically sized because I'm actually curious. Let me look at something real fast. Um, service CTA. Actually, what was the service button?
Oh, and you put the article in the chat. Nice. By the way, I'm totally open to like shameless plugs if people have anything they want to share cool that they have worked on. And just want to kind of throw it in the chat, feel free to do that. I was actually on a call with my extended meeting, like my VP and the three teams that fall under my VP. And at the end, he was like, "Does anybody have anything they want to brag about?" And it was kind of like awkwardly silent. And I was like, "Well, I'll do it," because we did on the Auth0 channel, which I haven't mentioned yet, but work for Auth0, which is a company that does identity and authentication authorization, really cool, targeted towards developers for setting up like a login process or generating tokens for security and that kind of stuff. So go check us out if you haven't before. But also on the Auth0 channel, AUTH, the number zero, we did our first live stream yesterday, and it was actually really, really good, and was really, really happy with it. So I kind of shouted that out in the end to kind of brag about that. So, all right, were you
So I just wanted
gonna?
to see
Yeah,
how
go
that
ahead.
background color would end up working. It works identically, but the philosophical line that I draw in the sand for grid versus flex is I want the button to size itself. I want to be able to specify a size on that button, whereas grid it works like this and it works the same way, but philosophically I'd rather define my layout and then let that flow in. So like I said, with one column stuff it works no matter what, but philosophically I go flex for that.
And that goes. I think I'm starting to see what you're saying. So within, like, because you, well, I don't know if I can articulate what I'm thinking either. So since we're in like that one column, they don't really act any differently because of the size of the column. You more like you're not trying to give your button a specific size. Like if you then if the text if that whole column was only one FR and the logo was like 10 FR and it was a small amount of stuff,
Mm-hmm.
then you're getting into like sizing issues.
And
I
what
don't
I'd
know.
like to what I would want to do on the button, right, is I want to say that the button also has a max width of some sort on it, so that it never becomes huge and allows the text to wrap inside of it. Um, and so with that, grid works, and we can see it still works. But then I applied a width to an element, and as soon as you're applying a width to an element, as soon as you want to apply a width to an element, then you want flex. You don't want
Okay.
grid anymore. You, for the most part, if you can, and it makes sense to keep all your grid stuff on the grid parent, on the grid container. And
Hmm.
when you want to add a width to something, I don't know, it can kind of go either way. But for me, flex, size your content, and then kind of move on.
Okay. Sweet.
And then the last two things, I'm gonna give you the rest of the answer on this, so we can do the third one. The third
Okay.
one is a little bit more exciting.
Okay.
Um, so you would add a border on the right
Mm.
of your CTA, right, to get that vertical border, and then you would also need a border on the bottom of your um, SVG area. The other solution would be you could actually bake in a 2 pixel column and row that hangs out in between the two rows. And you could use an after and a before element to put it in those spots. And then you could have that with your grid template areas. But
Mm.
that's not really the intent of the exercise. So that would be another possible solution.
Cool. Okay. So got the majority of it.
Mm-hmm.
Sweet. I'm gonna comment out that code as well.
And here's the code pen that has the finished product. as well. And it's also a responsive finished product, which I didn't make you do because I didn't want to put you through the pain of that.
Did you send it to me in
It's in chat.
text? In chat?
It's
What?
in chat.
Oh, yeah, that's easier now. Oh, don't look at all my text messages. I don't think they're too private. Although I did get, I sent out an email on my newsletter asking what people thought of my new, my recent cover images for YouTube,
Hmm.
and a friend of mine was basically like, "Well, your head is huge, but I guess it's all right." Did I copy the wrong?
I am sending you an image for exercise 3.
Oh, oh, you were sending me. That's the solution to
To
exercise
exercise
two.
2. Yeah,
Oh,
I
so
was
where are
posting
you?
that for people in chat.
Oh, so now I actually do need my images or my messages, right, for the image?
Yep.
Okay, there we go. As I like pull out all of my personal stuff.
And my personal stuff. I saw some personal stuff of mine in there.
Oh, yeah. So I don't know when Apple started doing this, but they changed from like displaying the name to the other thing that we'll try to keep secret. Sorry about that.
Hmm. No worries.
All right, so is this all? So which part of this am I working on? Is it just like one of these individual things, or is it the whole thing?
The whole layout and the right-hand side is your mobile design. That's what each promo should fall back to as
Oh,
mobile.
okay. Sweet. That's cool. I don't know about how to do the overlap stuff, and just unless you just add like some negative margins, and maybe that's what it is. I'm not sure. I'm assuming
I
there's a
would
more.
not do that.
I'm
You
assuming there's a
could do
more
that.
sophisticated way, but I don't
Yes.
know what it is right offhand.
So
Unless you define your width for the image column and then just make the image larger than that, or define the width of the image to be larger.
you could do that. That would work. That would feel like a hack to me. You can overlap elements. You can overlap elements
Oh, whoa!
in
Pause!
grid.
Pause! Pause! Pause!
Oh,
Pause!
pause,
Yeah, I
pause,
think.
pause.
I think. Yeah, I think. Let me give it a shot.
Okay.
Sorry, I didn't mean to shut you down, but I
No, perfect.
you like triggered what I think is possible. All right, so what do we have here? We've got a
This is actually brand new. I haven't actually written a tutorial or done a video on this, but I wanted to showcase overlap.
sweet. Yeah, that's really cool. Um, all right, so we've got. I'm assuming stripes is like all of the stripes, and then individual stripey is the
Stripes
class.
is more there so that I could keep it clean and keep a section around each of the
Hmm.
exercises. It is not really part of the exercise.
Okay, and I was gonna say there's not really any need in here. So because if we do our individual stripies and we get the layout for that taken care of, they're naturally just gonna sit on top of each other anyway, horizontally or vertically. Sorry. So there's no extra
Mhm.
stuff to do there. To your point, and then the change in the mobile responsiveness is just the actual individual card itself, not a container of the cards. So yeah, I think I get where you're going there. So the way you would do overlap stuff, and I'm assuming there's some z-index stuff to maybe figure out or maybe not, depending on how they lay out. But
Mhm.
basically, what you've done here is probably define like a 12 column grid, and this image would take, or the image over here would take up 9 of those columns, and then this text box here would take up 4.
Can I put
And
the kibosh on that? Can I stop you? Can I
can you
stop
put the
you?
what?
The kibosh, can I stop you?
Sure.
Yes, exactly what you're describing would work,
Hmm.
but that is a bootstrap mentality. That is a we can't bake our asymmetry into our layouts mentality. You can bake your asymmetry into your grid column definition, and you can have your overlap space be an actual column inside of that.
All right, then I don't know what the hell you're talking about.
All right, I'll give you a start. Let me go into the area. You can go ahead and switch over to code pen and I'll start working towards it.
Yep.
Um,
But and so
all right.
just with I like 12 was an arbitrary number. I don't think this actually changes what your general feedback is. It wasn't
You should
specific to like the bootstrap grid. It was just the fact that like you if you were doing it where you're like overlapping columns by defining specific column and span, then there's several columns in there, 10 or 12 or 16 or whatever it is. But um, go ahead.
Yeah. And so a big thing for me on that is we only need 3 columns to make this work. Um, So what we can do is we can say grid template columns,
I guess I need to scroll
and
down to see.
oh
There we
yeah,
go.
yeah, sorry.
Yep.
And then we can define out, and let me actually make this full screen, and I won't look at chat for the moment, if I need to be able to see everything. All right. And then we need each of these to have three columns. We need to have roughly like one FR and then some sort of overlap space to happen. So we'll say maybe there's a 100 pixel overlap space. And then we need a
Hmm.
smaller version than the 1 FR for the rest. And so that's going to be like, I don't know, 0.75 FR.
Okay. Can I pause and ask you a question?
Sure thing.
So does the same general idea apply, just not needing to do 12 columns? Like since you have that overlap gap, I'm assuming you're going to specifically define those two elements. The first one, the image is going to be in column one and span two columns, and the second will be in column two and then span two columns as well.
Correct.
Okay, gotcha.
Uh, so if you want to jump in, you can. I would actually say I forgot to put a container, and I would actually recommend adding some additional markup on each of these, which I'll go ahead and do for you because I
See,
really should have had that in there.
setting me up to
So
fail.
yeah, I know. Div stripey content.
While we're typing that out, anybody in chat, how many people have experience with CSS Grid? Is this stuff that you've seen before? I mean, we're definitely testing my like basic knowledge of CSS Grid. So how do people feel with the examples that we're doing? What's your experience level? Just give me a little bit of background on how you feel CSS Grid wise in the chat.
All right, and so here's what I'm going to recommend to you on this. I'm going to let you take it from here.
Okay.
I would love to show your chat named grid lines and the power and versatility therein.
uh, what did you said? I would love to see your chat name grid line
No, to show your chat that so that your chat gets to see
to
that.
show the chat room grid line. So
Yeah.
you're assuming that I actually have any idea how to write grid lines, which I think I do,
hmm
or at least
If if you
a
pay attention to
close
practical
guess.
CSS Grid, perhaps you would.
Yes. Well, I've seen it before. I've seen it
Yeah.
before. It's just a syntactical thing that I think starts with naming it inside of brackets. So before the
hmm
column definition here, I'm naming a grid line,
Yes. By
which,
default, grid lines come numerically, right? So the first
yes.
line's one, two, three, four, etc. But you
Yep.
can also name them.
Yep. So this would be, what is this thing called? The image. What do we call that thing?
Image.
Okay. So image start is what that would be. The second one would be two things, or actually, I'm gonna get off on this. So one of them in here will be both image and is it comma? I'm not sure.
No, no
And
comments, just spaces.
okay, and content begin.
Start.
Yeah, sorry.
I mean,
Oh,
if you want
just
the
being
syntactic sugar of
consistent.
it.
Yeah, just being.
Yeah.
But what I don't know from here, so like this will be my content end, and I'm not sure I'm doing this right because something would go in here, or I'm not sure. Is that right?
So
I guess is the general
you
question.
don't have to name any line that you don't want to. But
Okay,
here's the thing: what you've done is almost correct, but
close.
has one flaw to it. And yes, it's actually nice that you
Oh,
showed that you can put multiple name lines in one area. You can call a line as many names as you want. It might not like you for it, but you can. Um, nope,
really?
close, but nope.
Rats.
Nope.
Okay.
So think about where you want to go, and this would actually be a great time to like open this link up in like Firefox, but I won't make you do that because Firefox also can showcase more stuff. But if you were to here, I'll go ahead and jump in over here and say you want the content to start here. You're right about that, right? But you actually want your image to end after your overlap
Oh, okay.
area, right? And the
And
content
then
then needs to end
that will
at the
go.
end.
Okay, gotcha. Yep, that makes sense.
So nothing has
Yep.
changed on the screen, and by default, grid items will flow into the next available grid space. So how can we fix it to make them go where we want them to go?
Now I just be explicit on both of them because they'll take up one column apiece. So
Mm-hmm.
the stripy image will be
Sure.
grid. Is it just column, grid column?
Correct.
And it will be 1 and then span 2. So 1/span 2. It'll be in the start in the first column and then span 2 columns. And then, oh, and then you wanted maybe you just use the name of image start. Is that how you reference the grid, the named grid lines?
I'm gonna let you play this one out.
Yeah.
I'm gonna bring it back at the end. I'm gonna show you the actual way, but the way you're doing it now will work.
All right. Well, and actually, so maybe this is what you're getting at. We have those lines. We have the start and end for a reason, and now we can reference them that way. So we can come back to that if there's still an additional change to make.
Oh yeah, there's still an additional change to make.
And then stripy content, we'll do the same kind of thing where it's going to start at content start, and content end. And that define the row explicitly because it automatically bumps that thing down.
Yep.
So grid row
Don't forget
1.
your semicolon.
Thank you. That's why that thing didn't auto format either.
Hmm.
Okay.
Why did that happen?
Oh, because if that one's 1, then the other one will then not be 1. So now
It'll
doing this.
automatically bump it down. Yeah. Don't forget
Yeah,
your
so
semicolon.
I did it again. So now defining both of them to explicitly be in the same row, and then they have their own columns. The other part of this is the align items center. That should vertically center them.
But
Probably also,
is that what we wanted though?
maybe not. Let me double check. No. All right. So you could put these as a line. I don't even know what's the bottom. End.
End.
End. And then you've got some padding, so width or maybe margin. So margin bottom of this will bump it up a little bit. And it looked like a little bit bigger than something like 20 pixels, so maybe 40 pixels to bump that thing up a little bit.
I mean, you could also go in and you can define out rows if you wanted to and have your image span multiple rows and have the
Hmm.
text span not as many rows. That
Okay.
would be a possibility as well.
Yep.
So I'm going to blow your mind a little bit.
All right.
I tell people regularly. I've taught students. I've done like collegiate education around CSS that names are only as important as being consistent with them. And so you've done an excellent job of you named something image start and you used it as the image start line because the actual syntax. Let me jump into the actual thing. The actual syntax for grid template columns is grid. Sorry, this is the wrong area. I'm just going to delete this real fast. Don't worry, I'll bring it back.
My
Is
beautiful
grid
code.
start line slash grid end line, right? So whatever you've named the line you want to start, whether that's numeric given to you by the browser or whether that is named as you've done. So you did it exactly right, right? You named it those names that you made up here. Image start, image end. However, there is syntactic sugar in the CSS grid specification that says if you say dash start and dash
Hmm.
end,
I wondered
I can
about this.
assume that that is the start and the end line, and then you can just say image. And the
So
same down here with content.
yeah, that makes total sense. I was actually wondering about that when you started hinting at stuff. I don't think this one works, but
Oh,
I
that's
had
not working. Why
well
is that not
maybe.
working?
um, while you're looking at that, I had the same idea with grid template areas. Like if an element had a class that matched up with the name of an area, would
Mm-hmm.
it automatically put that thing in? Which it doesn't, but it's similar idea of it does some like inference to figure out what goes where.
I need to change the view to full page.
I'm gonna give,
Inspect this bad boy in Firefox.
and you're inspecting, so I can't see it here.
Yeah.
Image and content, and it looks like image is taking up the entire page.
It, well, it's taking up the entire space. Yeah.
Yeah. Is this a?
I wonder if we have a reserved keyword somewhere.
Oh, probably.
Oh no. Okay, so let's take a look at this real fast. You had image start
and
and
image
you
in.
had image
Yeah,
end,
so we
right? So
can't
let's
figure
make
that
them
out.
both. Yeah.
Okay.
So it
And
worked
then,
before because it found your starting line and then it got a little confused, but like it works now because it has that built in.
yep,
So yeah, without start and
sweet.
without end, it can just assume that your start and your end are image start, image end.
Okay,
So built into the browser for CSS Grid, it does that.
sweet. Yeah, that's really cool. I like that there's all these like shorthands, and that just comes with like experience. Like I don't really knock myself too much for not knowing that because that's
Yeah,
pretty specific. But once you
I just
see
like to
it and
show these
use it,
things.
yeah, it's super handy. I mean, that's what like I can't watch someone code and like not use shortcuts and not be like, you could do this and you could do this, right?
Mhm.
Like I don't want to be annoying about it, which you weren't, by the way. That's not what I mean. But like
I'm
I
perfectly happy being annoying. It's fine.
you just want people like everyone should be able to take advantage of all these awesome features and things that are out there. So I definitely see the point there. So um, let's go back to the original. What are we working on here? So that thing takes up. We don't have. I guess we could like in our stripey same thing as before. We could do a not a margin. I don't know what I'm doing. Or actually, I will use a margin, but max width of let's do 800 pixels, and we'll just make it a little bit smaller, and then margin 0 auto to center it. It actually
That's
looks,
tiny.
yeah, that's a lot smaller than I thought it was. 1200 maybe. Reload. That's actually still smaller than I thought it would be. How wide is my
So
screen?
here's my basic principles on doing this pattern that you're doing here.
Hmm.
I come in and I set a width of 95 VW. I set a max width of whatever I kind of want it to be, but in this case, I'd probably say like 1500, and then the margin auto. And that's
Hmm.
going to make sure that you actually don't need padding on this area to bring those
Yeah.
left and right margins in.
Right.
So you get to a certain point, and it's always ever going to be 95 VW, which means you get 2.5 VW left and right
Yep.
at
And
various sizes.
it looks like you lost that line, unless you meant to. Look like I don't
I
know.
did not mean to.
Okay. And people who are watching that may not be familiar. VW is view width. So basically, this is basically a percentage, right? So 100 VW is the entire width of the screen itself. 95 is 95% of the screen. So if you then center your content, you've got 2.5% divided by 2 on either side. That just kind of takes care of your padding. So same general idea,
Yep.
just using VW. And I think that's nice also because if you're because that means the padding will adapt based on the size of the screen, right? So like if
Mm-hmm.
I have 40 pixels hard coded and then I go to a smaller screen, I still have a whole 40 pixels on either side versus
Yep.
it might be 40 on a bigger screen and then I'm making up numbers, but like 20 on a smaller screen
Yep.
because it's a percentage. So I
Yeah, and this comes
cool.
into play with the mobile version.
Hmm,
We want a
cool.
little bit on either side on mobile, but it can be
Yeah.
a much tinier section on mobile.
Yeah, exactly. Cool. And I think so. This looked close enough to me, at least styling wise. Like I think yours is probably a little higher up.
It's
Um,
it's closer for me, close enough for me.
yeah.
I would put a little
Um,
margin in between each of these.
each like margin bottom just on each one.
Do we want to do margin bottom, or do we want to make sure that however many we have push away, but don't ever add a margin to the bottom of the entire promo stack?
What?
Exactly. So what if I were to tell you that we only want to add margin top to a stripey that is next to another stripey?
Margin top. So if and by next to that means it's a sibling of
A,
another
a
stripey.
direct a direct sibling, yeah.
Okay. So
So scroll down and see what
how?
happens.
Oh, okay. I'm trying to think through. I obviously think it's gonna work. But what you're saying is like why does the first one? Well, the first one will also have a margin top, right? Or yeah.
It will not because it is not directly adjacent to another one. The adjacency only happens uh,
Up.
after. Well, it only happens down, right? So you can never look at it once the HTML is parsed. It can never go back up and like look at previous things, at least not in terms of like making this performant in the browser. And so what it's going
Okay.
to do is it's going to say, here's the first one. Is there one directly before this that is there a stripey directly before this stripey? The answer to that is no. It always starts when you render CSS or when you're looking at CSS, it looks at the right hand of your selector first, and
So
then it goes backwards. And so it's going to say, are you a stripey? Yes. Were you directly preceded by another stripey? That's what the plus is.
and when
Were you directly
I
preceded by another stripey?
okay, so when I was saying it's only looking up, I think I'm saying what you're saying. Like from a given stripey, it's looking up to see if
Yes.
it's
Yeah.
comes after another stripey.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Sweet. Wow. Yeah, I had no idea.
Yep. And so this way you don't have a
Yeah.
margin on the top, but the other way would have been you would have set margin bottom on stripeys and then taken stripey last child, margin bottom 0.
0. Yeah.
And this is just a little bit more of an elegant solution to that.
Yep. Okay. Cool.
I
I
mean,
like that.
it's not exactly, it's one line less CSS, but it is, I like to think it's a more elegant solution to it.
Well, it's probably it's just one of those like it's kind of fancy and you want to be fancy, like just because you know CSS really well. Like I have that with JavaScript.
Yeah. I
Um,
use it a lot in like blog posts and stuff. All of my paragraphs, ULs, OLs, and stuff like that in my blog posts follow that pattern.
mhm, it's cool. Um, so looks like on the mobile side, and I think I can write a media query without having to look it up. By the way, this is a huge thing for me.
Nice.
After like 3 years of doing web development. So we've got the same general idea. Looks like we've got maybe two equal height columns. So like one FR, a gap of 50 pixels or something, and then, or no, sorry, these couldn't be one FR. These would have to be heights, because unless you define a height for the actual card, which you could.
So let me ask you this, James.
Yep.
Does every problem require a grid solution?
It does. So if it wasn't a grid solution, you could just take away display grid, and then you could use your margin top to just take it
You
up.
could use you could use a negative margin top, or you could use a transform translate Y to do it. Either way.
What's the is there any difference in terms of implications between those two?
The margin top negative margin, I believe, will pull the entire flow with it, and the translate Y will
Won't.
not.
Okay.
It'll leave the box where it was and just translate the content up. So either way is fine. The margin top is probably the safer solution to go with that on that.
Okay. So what we're looking at, if I write this correctly, media query, this will be a max width, and this means that these styles will be valid for any width less than 786 if that's what I pick, because max, it's going to go up until the max of 786. 786 pixels, and then we want to target our stripey again. And just set this to a display block.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess I need to shrink my screen to actually see this. How,
CodePen actually shows you your sizes when you're
where,
sizing down.
do you see it?
Let me size it. Yeah, when I get
Oh,
to yeah.
okay, it looks like, okay, looks like that did it. And now my
Actually,
code,
it'll be easier if you change your view in CodePen to have the editor on the side, on the right-hand side. Click the change view at the top right,
change view, and
left or right, depending on what you want there.
yeah, gotcha. Oh, cool. Okay,
Okay.
so
Yep.
that'll
Then you
work.
can size that down.
Yep. All right. So get rid of change view. So let's make these things scale down and take our stripy content and do a margin top of negative 40 pixels.
One of these days, I'm going to break you using pixels. We're just going to be using rems left and right.
Yeah. Fair enough. Stripy content, is that just not quite enough?
Let me inspect it real fast. I mean, you can go ahead and start making changes.
Oh, I think that got up 100 pixels, got it up there.
Okay.
And then I feel like I'm kind of hacky with z-index. Like I like it has to come on top of the image, I think is the problem. But that didn't appear
Select the
to
text.
work. Select the, what do you mean?
Select
Oh.
the text.
Is it on top of it?
It's on top.
Did I
In
not
terms of
do
z-index and stacking context, the the last element is always on top. It stacks down the tree. So
Okay.
by default, you wouldn't have to worry about it in this case. Plus, the stacking context would be weird because you haven't actually positioned anything.
So
So
where did my background go though? Because I had a
that
background white on this,
that's an entirely fair question. Let me look at the code real fast.
and I'm getting tired of standing. I'm gonna adjust and sit down. I can't. I just can't
Stacking.
stand all that long. I'm wondering if anybody, like, I'm still having fun, so I'm good with this. But anybody left in the chat? We've got some people listed in there. Anybody still active and hanging out and actually watching?
Where did that background color go?
Yeah, that was the reason. That was the reason I jumped to like a Z index, just because I couldn't figure out why that thing was gone. Cool. Still got a couple people watching. Ancient Coder, thanks for being here the whole time. K-Torn, haven't talked to you yet, I don't think. Shout out to you. Thanks for being here. If either one of you, like I said, want to give me a little bit about who you are or anything, let me know. Everybody see the puppy dog in the background, by the way? She gets, I guess she heard me and her ears perked up, but that's our spot on the couch. Also, some fun stuff for the setup in here. I don't know if people can see, but these like posters, these are Harry Potter posters, which are really, really cool that my wife got me. And yeah, she's totally chill. Um, Unfortunately, like when I use lights for streaming and videos and stuff, they have glare. So I got some stuff to put on the wall that hopefully is not going to have a glare. And then Brian, you might appreciate this. I also got
Hmm.
letters, like individual wooden letters from
Nice.
Michael's, and I'm going to spell out and have Learn, Build, Teach up there.
I like it.
So I'm excited about that. So keep an eye out on future streams for a little bit of change to the background there.
All right, I gotta go into full screen mode on this to actually inspect it better. Refresh.
So is it like, have I succeeded if like I did something that seems reasonable to you and then it you can't figure out why? Is that like is that a reverse challenge?
Yeah.
Stump the
Although I will
stumper,
say that you were supposed to add a little bit of additional sizing tweaks to the to make it have the image coming around at the bottom.
coming.
Let me
Not sure what you mean.
go back to
Um,
the actual design.
and also, you got a comment in the chat. Ancient Coder says, Brian, do you stream? Yes, he does. Brian L. Robinson, with the name that you used in the comment. So, yes, he does. Design reviews was actually this morning. And then
Yep.
if you want to shout out just the other types of videos and streams you do, feel free to
I
do
do a
that as
lot of
well.
CSS, JavaScript, Jamstack. We've been recently working on my stream overlay by utilizing Comfy.js, which is a JS library for interacting with Twitch. And so a lot of things that can happen on my stream, you can actually type commands in, and I interface with that in JavaScript. So we've been building that live on stream as well.
Sweet. Yeah, and
Why does the background color not come in?
Brian and I are we are both in Memphis. For those who aren't aware, we get to hang out and collaborate and run ideas past each other, and I think help each other in different areas that we
Mm-hmm.
can offer help in. CSS is the big one that you can kind of, I mean, run circles around me for the most part. But
All right, James. I don't have a good reason why the margin top's not working and why that's pulling it in behind. So the two things that I think are happening, and
I
there's a
win.
fix. No, no, not yet. I can fix it. Two things are happening. One is the margin top is actually a problem when you use transform translate y negative 30 pixels. It
And
does pull it up.
okay,
So
and
like you
and
can have
that
like
one. That one will be when you do the transform translate. We talked about this a second ago. That doesn't actually change the flow of the document. When you use margin, it'll
correct.
move it up, and everything else will kind of shift up with it. So
Yeah.
with the
And so what I
translate,
think
this
is
will just
happening.
move that one thing up, and everything else below it stays the same.
Yeah. So you're not wrong in that ZNX might be a solution. I'm going to test that real fast. But the problem is we don't have a stacking context to work within right now because we don't have any positioned content. Nothing has position relative, position absolute, that sort of thing on it. So theoretically, if we create this as a stacking context
Well,
or stripey,
so if we're talking about the potential z-index, is there any possible way that the background could be on a different layer than the text?
the element itself, which is div class stripey content, that is its own pane. Um,
Right. So even if like we proved that the text was showing on top of the image, so I wouldn't think that would make me think that z-index is not even a possibility. You know what I'm saying? Like if the text and the thing wouldn't be on different layers.
Sorry, going back in time and okay, here we go. So we have to position the stripy content. If you position the stripy content, then margin top works. The negative margin works there. Positioning it creates it as its own stacking context and means that it's going to be above everything else. By positioning that, it automatically comes in on top of anything that's not z-indexed higher at that point.
But what's the difference? Like we had already proven that the text was on top of the image. How can the text and its background color be on different
I'm
indexes?
not gonna lie. I'm gonna think this is actually like one of those weird things in CSS. I'll have to research it. I don't actually know why.
Cool.
But it's like when you float things, weird things have to happen in the browser to make the things collapse properly. There's something happening there. I don't know off the
Yeah.
top of my head what is causing that issue. I'll look it up and see if I can figure that out.
I'm
Hey,
just.
thanks, Ancient Coder. I appreciate the follow on my stream. We won't probably won't be live tomorrow. My
Oh,
son's
oh,
also
oh.
home with all the viral stuff going around. So Friday will probably be the next stream, and we'll do some fun JavaScript stuff.
JavaScript stuff. And I just made
And you
one
can
little
take a
tiny.
load at my emotes there.
What? So what do you when you like? What do you mean by that when you say take a load of my? Yeah, are you
Well,
giving them or are you just
I
commenting
just
them?
sent those. If I just like to spread the love, so
But
I just
that's
want them to see the emotes in chat.
but those are just like that's just something. It's not a special thing. You just put that in chat.
Subscribe. So yeah, they can use it in any chat they want. If they are a subscriber of mine, they can then go and use those emotes in everything. So I'm a subscriber of InstaFluff, so I can use his in your stream. I'm a subscriber. I've been gifted subscriptions to DeviCat, which is a cool artist that I really like a lot.
And
Um,
where are you selecting these things from?
if you look in chat on the right hand side, there's a little face.
Hmm.
That's the emote panel. You can also know the words you have to type in to do it, but I'm really bad at that. And there might be better ways, and maybe better Twitch people can. Uh,
Okay, so I've just got. I don't think I've subscribed to anyone because I haven't actually connected to Amazon Prime. But so
if you if
after
you if
after I
you had your own
subscribe to
channels,
yours, well, yeah, that too.
yeah,
Okay. All right. So then it just becomes the icon that you put in there, just like any other icon.
yep,
Okay. Cool. All right. You're figuring this stuff out. By the way, I think we should keep the red background. That looks good. That's nice.
sure. And that way you'll know when the media query takes effect.
That's right.
Um, so there
Yeah.
was
Just
one more
the
piece on this challenge if you wanted to do it, and that would be it's supposed to alternate sides at desktop size.
desktop size.
So if you look at
Okay.
the design,
Yeah. Gotcha.
they go left, right, or right, left, right, left.
Yeah. Actually, so this is interesting because I think what this will be is you can do a grid order on every nth one of those. Or sorry, well, no, not grid order because they're not automatically filling. You can flip the definition of where those things go based on every other one. So, all right, let me go back one step. I
Yeah.
did like a checkered board layout in my video where I had it was full width, image, text, and then text, image, and then it
Yep.
switches going down.
Yep.
And with that, I would like in the actual markup, I had them ordered the way that I wanted. So in this one, I had image first and then text, and then in the next one, I
Mm-hmm.
had text and the image.
Mm-hmm.
But and then what I would do is when you went down to responsive, I would just change the order. So because they didn't have specific columns that they were going in, they just automatically went in. I could then change the order in the media query, and they would take care of themselves. But I could have also done that just in CSS to start, where I go into every nth one and do an order change. And Kate Torn, thanks for coming. Also appreciate the subscribe. Thanks for being here. Hopefully see you soon. I don't know if
Yeah.
any of
So
that made
so
sense, but
it makes sense if you if and I don't know how order plays with grid, to be perfectly honest. I don't use order that much. You can do some order stuff, but really with grid you want to be placing things. And so my intended solution, if you want to know what that is that you would redefine your grid template columns and you'd keep your line names the same, but you would change where those lines are and the
okay,
size of the columns that they go around.
gotcha. Okay, let's actually do that. So this would be, we have to change the definition of the grid template columns for every odd stripey, for
Even
example.
stripey. But yes.
Either way, but
Yep.
in this one specifically, and I don't know the syntax for that, so you can help me out here.
You could,
Nth.
I gotta remember, but I think there's actually an even pseudo selector. Let me check that real fast.
Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and start typing this out, and then we can get the specifics.
Nth child parentheses even, if I remember correctly. Yeah, parentheses even. So
Okay,
stripey colon nth child parentheses even will get you all even.
sweet.
It would
Okay,
also be 2n would work for that too.
okay, gotcha. So inside of here, we want to change just change the defined names, and we'll start with
And you'll
the.
actually be reversing the column sizes as well. The 100 pixels will
Oh,
stay in the
right.
middle,
Okay.
but you'll want to change those so they always are the same
Yep.
sizes.
Okay. So yeah, good point. I forgot those are different. 75
I love that
or
you put a
point
zero in
75.
front of that. So JavaScript of you.
I don't think I usually do that. I don't know why I did that, to be honest. I don't. Oh, I don't know. Anyway, so then this would start the content. So content
Yep.
start, and then this would be the image start.
Yep.
This would be the
Content end.
content end, and this would be the image end.
Theoretically, that should just work.
Eh.
Didn't, which is fun, but
Yep.
theoretically,
Does
we might have done our nth child improperly or something. Let me check that.
okay.
Um, yeah, it's not seeing that nth child selector that we worked out. Do nth child to n and just that should be.
2n.
That's hold on. Let me actually read through what you did
Mm.
there.
Think I broke
I
it in
was
some
I was
other way.
ignoring you while I was looking at other things. It is actually nth
Dash.
child.
Now that was very JavaScript of me.
That my
That is
friend
fair.
was super
Yeah.
JavaScripty.
That's man. This is probably one of the most badass examples I've seen. Like, there's been some really cool tidbits in this. That's really badass. Because like, nth child is something I'm like really uncomfortable with. And actually, now that we're here and talking about it, this would
Yeah.
help me a lot. So, nth child.
Mm-hmm.
It's your. It's not the. What is it a child of? Does that make
It, it
sense?
it is itself a child. If this is the nth child inside of a container, inside of another element,
So if I had all of these stripies inside of a container, and then I put
which you do,
another stripey outside of a container, but the same stripey code, it would not get this because
it's
it's
still
not.
inside of a container. It's still inside the body container.
So
You can't.
they don't have to have. It's not children of the same parent.
Yes.
It's
Now,
just
granted, for the most part, stripey nth child, uh, even you might not have anything happen with that if you moved it outside of its container because it might not be an even child of the
right.
body parent.
If I
They're
added
like
three of them outside of the div, it would
at
they
least one of them would be.
yeah right yeah fair enough. So nth child means it's got, in this case, a stripey class. It's any
Mm-hmm.
element that has a stripey class that is a child of any element
Yeah, that is an even in the definition that you
in the
made, an
even,
even
yeah.
child of anything.
So there's never. So maybe this is just a naming thing, but there's no element inside of the body that's not a child of something, right?
I mean, theoretically, and I've never tried this. You could try the HTML element to be an nth child and see what happens, but it would never. I mean, maybe it would be the nth child one of the browser, but I don't know. I've
Okay.
never tried that. Never needed that. But the root element is an HTML element that has no siblings.
Okay. So I feel like this is what you're saying is what I how I expected it to work, but I
Mm-hmm.
tried nth child a while ago for something random and I can't remember what it was, and it didn't do what I thought. Like, I expected it to go through and grab, or maybe I thought about it differently. Maybe I thought it was like the nth child of a specific container, and maybe that's what I thought. I'm not sure, but I thought I had expectations and it didn't do what I expected. It sounds like this actually does what now I would expect, and it makes a lot more sense to me, which hopefully is good.
Yeah.
Sweet. Yeah, that's a
Yeah. So
really that's a really cool demo of combining just redefining names. And I think like I would
mhm.
have you could already see several times during the stream where I would have gone through and I could like hack some stuff and I could make it work. But there's like in a lot of scenarios much easier, cleaner ways to do same type of thing, which is just a lot of fun to experiment with.
Now, if you want, there's a palette cleanser at the end here, which I think I finished the HTML while we were talking earlier. It was the one that I wrote, and I didn't actually finish the HTML. Let me actually do that live if y'all want to go and look at one more thing.
Go for it.
Okay. Let me grab a new asset.
I guess I need to. I'm gonna go ahead and comment out the rest of the code,
Okay.
although that doesn't seem to work very well. I think CodePen's being kind of finicky with me.
Yeah.
Maybe it's my mouse. Let's see.
So I've made don't
Well,
I'm coming out my
oh,
last
there
thing,
it is. I couldn't find the end
and
because
let
it's so
me get you a
delayed. All right.
screenshot. Let me find a screenshot for you on this one.
Well, I keep closing messages, so I don't have them open. Now I gotta open it again.
Well, I can only do so much for you, James.
Yeah. Well,
Let's
sorry. It's gonna
see.
pop open on.
It's okay.
There we go.
Let me pull this. And actually, I don't even. So we're going to pretend, let me find your message here, that we want it to look like this. You don't have to worry about the text inside of it because I obviously did not bring uh, any text in the HTML. Come on, messages, work with me here. All right, fine. I'll just take a screenshot.
Which messages
Um,
is the best? And like the messages app is one of the best inventions ever.
yeah. All right, so there's that. Don't worry about the fancy color. Don't worry about the text. We just want to get this layout done.
I have. Sorry, you want me to do this one?
Yeah,
Oh,
I
I
wrote
thought
the
you
HTML.
said.
What more do you want?
Oh, I thought you I guess when you said the HTML, I thought you were saying you were gonna do it live. Um,
And
cool.
while you're working on this, or I'll do it live if you want to look at it and say, how would I do this layout in Flex?
Well, I want to let me talk through this in
Yeah,
Grid.
sure.
And to me, this is pretty straightforward. This is four columns and two rows, and so the first promo image. This is actually probably a great time for grid template areas, where I would define a grid template area that takes up um, like I said, two columns and two rows. Then the promo space 2 is one column, two rows, and then promo space 3 and 4 take up one column, one row apiece. If I were to do this in Flexbox, you would have to have a flex container to set this promo space 1 next to this promo collective space over here. So this would have a div around it inside of a Flexbox div. Then this thing would have a nested Flexbox div as well, and these last two would have a div around them that would lay them out horizontally. So in Flexbox, you have to have multiple nested divs, and I think that like this is the simplest, especially getting started, like example of the benefit of grid. And then I think you may or may not use grid template areas, but works really well for grid template areas, where similar to what you just did before, where you rename, or what we did, rename the grid lines, you redefine your grid area, and then they snap to where they want to be when you
So
do immediate
you're
query.
you're exactly right in all but one thing.
Damn.
And I'm disappointed because you came to my talk in Louisville. It's called the Join the CSS Future with CSS Grid. And the
Mm-hmm.
one mistake that you made there, I actually call out in that presentation. YouTube link in chat. Um, so the one thing I would say is that why do you think you need four columns?
Because oh no, you don't.
You bake
Just
your asymmetry
because
into your grid definition.
Yeah, you're right. Yep, that's easy. That's easy in the sense that I should have known that. I get what you're saying. Yeah, and I think that does. So to your point earlier, going back to just like there are equally divided grids line or grid columns. I think that's what you were going for when you suggested like the implication of like bringing Bootstrap with you has changed the way you think about it. Yes, I think you're exactly right, and you define and like two or three of the examples in the videos on my YouTube video are asymmetric. So it's
Mhm.
certainly
What
something
and
I
when
know
you
how to
look at
do.
this, and the thing that I bring up in the presentation, again, that YouTube link in the chat is when you come at it from a bootstrap point of view, you look at it and you say it's a 12 column layout. You've
Hmm.
got 6 columns on the
6, yeah.
left, you've got 6 on the right, and those bottom two are
3
three
and
columns
3.
each.
Yeah.
If you make one step in the transition towards grid, you say it's a 4 column layout, 2 on the left, 2 on the right.
Hmm.
And then you realize it can
You
be a
don't,
3 column
yeah.
grid because you only have 3 columns.
Fair
So yeah,
enough. Yep. Understood. Are you?
you want me?
Honestly, I'm tired. I understand what's going on. I'm
Okay.
good with you. Just go ahead and take care of it.
All right. Let's see. So we have a class of asymmetry, right? And then inside that we have anchors, but we don't really need to worry about those anchors quite yet. We have an asymmetric grid. So we're going to say this is display grid, and then grid template columns are where we're going to find out our columns. Actually, I have a new way of doing this that I like to worry about. So let's introduce the idea of a full grid template. This matches up the syntactic sugar of grid template areas, which you were talking about, James, alongside the actual grid definition all at the same time. So what we can do is we can set a series of quotation mark delimited strings, right? And each one of these is going to be one row's worth of grid named lines. And so we want a grid template that's going to have our definition of 3 columns, right? So the first one's going to be our main area, and then the next two are going to be our second spot, right? And then we're also going to have a second row on this that's going to have our main again, because we want that main element to span 2 rows. And then we want our third item, and then finally our fourth item. But the cool thing that adds syntactic sugar on top of this, which is not in that video and not in any of my tutorials, is that we can actually name out our sizes for our rows and our sizes for our columns in this. So we can actually say this is a 1FR space, this is a 1FR space, slash, and then we can come in here and we can say this is going to be 2FR, and then each of these, don't autocomplete for me there, computer. Each of these is 1FR, right? And I think I've gotten all the syntax correct there. But then we add a semicolon, which I always forget when I do my grid templates and my grid template areas. And then what we can do is we want a grid gap as well, because we want about 1 rem's worth of space in between each of them. So that's a shorthand for grid column gap, grid row gap. And then from there, you can see we already have some stuff happening the way things are pulling in on that left-hand side, right? So we have our our 3 columns, right? Automatically, grid is laying them out along those cells. So we automatically have 2FR here, 1FR, 1FR. You can't see where I'm pointing because I'm not actually screen sharing. We automatically have the left-hand side taking up 2 times the space of the right-hand side. But then that fourth item automatically goes onto the second row. So what we need to do is we need to define out each of our items. I'm just going to use the nth child selector again. So we've got asymmetry, and then we've got anchors, and the nth child of 1, right? That first child is going to be grid area, and that's going to define out both the row and the column area. And that's going to be now the word main. Then our asymmetry, a nth child 2, is going to be in the grid area second. And then we need to do some fancy work around our images, because images don't want to stretch. Images want to maintain their aspect ratio. So we actually want our asymmetry. I shouldn't have named it asymmetry. It's so hard to spell for me. Asymmetry images, we want them to have a height of 100%, and that's going to stretch them horribly. There they
Oh,
are.
nice.
Yep. And actually, we probably want these. I'm going to, for now, define these out so we can see things better as a pixel value for our rows. There they are, and they're all stretched out. So we also want them to have an object fit of cover. And now we have along the lines of that layout. Now, ideally, we would come back in, we'd refactor away from hard pixel values here into something a little bit more. We also need width 100% on these, because you can see that top row on the right-hand side isn't getting that. So we can say width 100%. And again, cover is going to keep us in check for the way that that works, much like background size cover would work. And now we have that automatically sized there.
Sweet.
Theoretically, it should if we had text and we were using these as background images, which they probably should be instead for something like this, we could set that and have some padding and have that take care of things. But in the video, I go into more detail. In that blog post, I go into more detail about how to make this a little bit more usable further down the line.
Cool.
The
I do not know. Yeah, combining just grid template instead of grid template areas. That's not something I've actually seen. I don't think
the
I
other way to
saw
do it would be grid template columns, and then you could specify two FR, one
one of
FR,
yeah,
one FR, grid template rows,
yeah.
which in this case we'd have two 400 pixels. You can use the repeat functionality or anything like that to do that. And then this would be grid template areas instead, and it would all work out if you do
And
it
then get
without
rid
this
of yeah.
syntax. Which that should just work. Let's see. There you go.
There
So
you go.
same
Yeah.
basic principle, just a bigger shorthand that's coming. It's in browsers. Actually, in CSS Grid, the CSS Grid level 3 specification, I think some syntax that I helped write is actually going to get in, which I'm super excited
Really?
about.
That's cool.
Yeah, it's because you can't do overlap using grid template or grid template areas. You can't specify an overlap area. So if you want to keep everything in grid areas, you have to go into named lines instead. And so like we wrote some syntax, and it just had a whole bunch of Tab Atkins came in and said, yeah, that makes sense, and like gave his blessing on it. So
Nice.
or their blessing on it. So
That's super cool.
really exciting. Hopefully that'll come into browsers in the next year or so. We'll see.
Yeah. Nice. That's cool to be a part of. Um, where is the street signs look familiar? Where are those?
I don't know. This is just an asset
Oh, where
from
to
Code.
Ancient Coder says they look familiar. Where do you think they're from, Ancient Coder? And while you tell us where they're from, man, I'm exhausted. I'm ready to from London. I could see that. I'm been pushed to my limit. You have your son coming in now. Looks like it might be time for Brian to go too, or his son will just join. What's up? I guess he probably can't hear me since I'm in the headphones, but
Mr. James is finishing up in just a second.
But we are still figuring out what kind of where that's doing.
You can go ahead.
cool. So yeah, we'll go ahead and wrap up. Again, on my YouTube channel, I've got a video of 10 examples that are a little bit simpler than some of the stuff that we did.
You're just going to be inside that second. So you're not going to miss it.
Yep, I won't miss it.
You will miss this a little bit.
I won't. Okay. If y'all didn't see the stream earlier, that was the stream earlier.
Yeah, it's a whole work from home thing. So yeah, if extra content on CSS Grid, you've got the course from Brian, you've got stuff on his live stream as well, so definitely check him out. I got the YouTube video that I put out that came out yesterday on the 10 examples of CSS Grid that are a little bit simpler. Maybe a better opportunity for getting started if you're looking to get into CSS Grid. And then you can find me on anything social media at James Q Quick. If you haven't subscribed to the channel and you enjoyed it, please do. I'd love to have you come back for another stream. You can also find more about me and what I do on jamesqquick.com as well. And if you have any questions or requests or things you want to see, feel free to reach out and let me know. But in the meantime, Brian, thanks for coming. Thanks for joining. Thanks for challenging me. That was actually really cool. I think that went really well. And I will post this up to YouTube. I'm going to do that on a regular basis now to get that video up to YouTube. Probably tomorrow on my channel, James Q Quick, also there. So you can go and find it there and recap what we did. In the meantime, thanks everyone for coming, and I'll see you next week. Later.